are many movies out there that are famed for making people cry. What are some of cinema's greatest emotional powerhouses? Well, The Green Mile, Titanic, Schindler's List, Grave of the Fireflies, Manchester by the Sea, Marley and Me, It's a Wonderful Life, The Notebook, and The Fault in Our Stars are some of those that leap to mind. With those flicks, first-time viewers will come armed with a box of tissues, as their reputation precedes them. In some cases, the film's subject matter or marketing will brace viewers for a cry. Having said that, not all tearjerkers come with a warning. Sometimes a completely unexpected movie makes you weep and thus hits particularly hard. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, and let's take a look at these movies you weren't expecting to make you cry. Starting with Men in Black 3. Men in Black 3 is a so-so threequel that didn't really need to happen, but it does hit you with a tear-jerking moment right when you're least expecting it. The pairing of Agent J and Agent K was always the absolute high point of these movies, and this ending reframes that relationship entirely, giving it an emotional new dimension. At the end of this time travel adventure, in which J goes back in time to prevent the death of K, a colonel allied with K sacrifices himself to save K's life. As J watches from a distance, he is astonished to see his younger self emerge from a nearby car, and he realizes that the colonel was his father. All along, he'd met K as a child. Earlier in the film, main antagonist Boris the Animal had killed the younger K, and the future changed. But J was the only one who remembered his partner, and this early encounter is why. Again, Men in Black 3 isn't that great, but this ending twist is genuinely and sincerely affecting. Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again. 2008's Mamma Mia was a purely light-hearted musical that, for better or worse, positively overflowed with campy joy and never made any particular effort to tug at the heartstrings. The sequel, on the other hand, did things a little differently. Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, an unasked-for sequel which looked terrible from the trailers, was a pleasant surprise in more ways than one. Alongside being a generally solid musical rom-com that was, if anything, better than the original film, it also had an unexpected emotional punch. It was noticeable that the movie's trailers barely featured Meryl Streep's Donna at all. And once Here We Go Again arrived, it was confirmed that the character had recently died. Thanks to this plotline, it became a much more heartfelt movie than pretty much anyone could have reasonably expected, as Donna's daughter Sophie deals with losing her mother just as Sophie herself is about to become one. Scenes such as Sophie performing with her mother's bandmates in tribute to her and performing a duet with Donna's ghost at her son's christening will leave viewers with a lump in their throat, which is definitely not what anyone expected from a Mamma Mia sequel of all things. 28 years later, as Dr. Ian Kelson says in this long-awaited threequel, quote, "There are many different kinds of death, some better than others." The 28 Days Later franchise has generally featured brutal zombie deaths, yet the greatest death within this one was something that's painfully relatable for many of us: the death of a parent. 28 Years Later was misleadingly marketed, which goes a long way to explaining why it was so divisive. The trailers sold a dark, zombie-heavy post-apocalyptic bloodbath, and yet it ultimately ended up being more of a coming-of-age road trip movie in which young Spike has to learn to survive in post-apocalyptic Britain. The bulk of the story is Spike taking his ill mother Isla to see a former doctor on the zombie-infested mainland. Once they reach the lodging of Ian Kelson, he is able to examine her and confirms that she has cancer. With the condition now advanced, her life is beyond recovery. In a beautifully executed scene that no doubt broke the vast majority of viewers, after sharing a final moment with her son, Isla allows herself to be euthanized peacefully by Dr. Kelson. 28 Years Later is not without its issues, and it never came close to living up to those amazing trailers. But this sequence was practically flawless, and Spike's acceptance of his mother's mortality was an excellent way to conclude his journey. Top Gun Maverick. Top Gun Maverick is one of the most shockingly great movies possibly ever. It's a sequel to an 80s film that hasn't aged well, and the trailers looked solid at best. So this being arguably one of the greatest films of the 2020s was totally unexpected. The key to Maverick's magic is the way it's able to mix euphoric and explosive action sequences with soulful character drama. No word of a lie, this is a deeply affecting look at guilt and grief, featuring many powerful, splendidly written moments of quiet contemplation and anchored by one of Tom Cruise's best performances in the lead role. Hans Zimmer's exquisite musical score makes the whole thing even more emotional, and Lady Gaga's beautiful theme song, Hold My Hand, would be a great cry-in-the-car song for anyone. There's a particularly effective scene with returning character Iceman, who's now dying of cancer, having a final poignant conversation with Captain Mitchell. He has to do this mostly through text on his computer as his throat cancer has mostly taken his voice. Now this moment hit especially hard due to its real-world links. Val Kilmer famously survived throat cancer, and much like Iceman in this sequence, he could no longer speak clearly due to his throat surgery. Of course, much like Iceman, Kilmer is no longer with us, so this is a movie that's going to get even more powerful with time. The World's End. The World's End, which sees 5 old friends getting caught up in an alien invasion while trying to do the Golden Mile, a legendary pub crawl, is a much darker beast than either of the Cornetto trilogy's first 2 installments, Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. It's headlined by Gary King, by far and away the most tragic character in the trilogy. He's a depressed and immature 40-year-old alcoholic who's never really grown up. Near the end of the movie, while fighting with his former best friend Andy, it's even revealed that he's recently tried to take his own life. Now, the scene in question is one of the saddest comedy movie scenes of all time. As both men reveal their terrible struggles with adult life, Gary is severely depressed and believes that the Golden Mile is all he's got, while Andy's marriage has broken down. It's a scene that's filled with painfully relatable dialogue, and Simon Pegg, who co-wrote the film, later revealed his own struggles with alcoholism influenced the screenplay. Still, there might be some happy tears later on. Gary, bless his heart, gets the aliens to abandon their invasion and refuses an offer to become his younger self again without a second thought. Although humanity is sent back to the Dark Ages when the aliens leave, a now sober Gary is afterwards shown to have found his place in the world at last. Deadpool and Wolverine. While the first 2 Deadpool movies had some sincere emotional moments, they never necessarily approached tearjerker territory. Deadpool and Wolverine, on the other hand, that absolutely did, and its genuinely beautiful climax will leave many a viewer wiping away tears. At the movie's end, an alternate variant of Wolverine and Deadpool heroically sacrifice themselves to stop the MCU's latest supervillain from destroying the universe. They do this by disrupting the power flow of the movie's MacGuffin, the Time Ripper. Despite their healing powers, this process is expected to kill them both permanently. There's then a euphoric montage that pays loving tribute to these 2 beloved heroes, all soundtracked to a mesmerizing choral cover of Madonna's Like a Prayer. In the end, they do survive, as sharing the power equally spares them, but that wasn't necessarily guaranteed. For a second there, it really did look like they were going to die. And even if they had, this would have been a perfect ending for them. Deadpool going out with the most heroic act he's ever committed while recalling his beloved Vanessa. Wolverine finally regarding himself as a true hero and accepting the loss of his own world. This would have slapped! Also, when the 2 heroes who previously hated each other nod respectfully before their supposed deaths, that too was enough to provoke floods of happy tears. Everest. In a Hollywood survival thriller such as Everest, you'll usually expect a fairly upbeat ending. Even if this one happened to be based on a true story, they often seem to pick out the stories with happier endings in order to make them easier to digest. Well, that certainly was not the case here. As many viewers probably only discovered when they watched the film, this particular story does not have a happy ending at all. Everest recounts the 1996 Mount Everest disaster. 8 people died during a blizzard on the mountain. And honestly, it's pleasantly surprising that a studio greenlit a big-budget survival thriller that had such a downbeat ending. Some of the characters seen in the film do survive, but several die in the disaster, including lead character Rob Hall, who was about to become a father. And there's a particularly tough scene where Rob speaks to his wife one last time, although the part that'll wreck viewers the most is the closing titles. These show pictures of those who died, footage of Rob Hall's daughter, named Sarah, which is the name he's shown asking his wife to use in their last phone call, and the text also reveals that the bodies of everyone who died remain on Mount Everest. It's absolutely crushing. Final Destination Bloodlines. A Final Destination movie making people cry was not exactly on people's bingo cards. Nevertheless, Final Destination Bloodlines managed to do the unthinkable. When franchise mainstay William Bloodworth, played by horror icon Tony Todd, returns in Final Destination Bloodlines, he is revealed to be a survivor of a premonition himself, and he's on the same list as the movie's main characters. He's now ill with cancer and predicts that he will die once the others do, but he's made peace with that. Before he goes, he says to protagonist Stephanie and her family, quote, "I intend to enjoy the time I have left, and I suggest you do the same. Life is precious. Enjoy every single second. You never know when... Good luck." And he then leaves. This scene would have been touching enough on its own, but most viewers understood exactly what was really going on here. When Tony Todd came on set to film this scene as William Bloodworth, he knew that he was dying of cancer and that this would be his final film appearance. Directors Adam Stein and Zach Lipovsky allowed Todd to improvise his character's final lines, so these words are Todd's final message to his many fans. What a beautiful farewell to a beloved genre legend. He will never be forgotten. Straight Outta Compton. As well as being a fantastic biopic that was so much better than pretty much everyone was expecting, the NWA biopic also had two of the most crushing, upsetting death scenes in any 2010s Hollywood movie. First up, there's the sequence where Dr. Dre discovers that his younger brother Tyree has been murdered, a scene which movingly showcases the relationship between the bandmates as the others try to comfort their heartbroken friend. Still, as those unfamiliar with the real history of the band would only discover later, there's worse to come. Towards the end of the movie, there is an almost unwatchable sequence where Eazy-E is admitted to hospital with what he thinks is just a simple chest infection, only to be told that he's got a severe case of HIV and now has 6 months to live at the very most. Only the coldest viewers won't be moved by Jason Mitchell's harrowing performance here, and it's still staggering that Mitchell wasn't nominated for an Oscar for this role. Now, this was several years prior to the various personal controversies that have seen Mitchell largely disappear from view. $1 Million Baby. When people went into $1 Million Baby, most probably expected a run-of-the-mill inspirational boxing drama. That most definitely is not how things turn out. The first hour and a half goes more or less how you'd expect. And then rising boxer champ Maggie is left paralyzed for life when she breaks her neck during a boxing match. And then the final section of the film is a somber and bruising meditation on euthanasia, as Maggie asks her trainer Frank to euthanize her, and he struggles with the ethics of this request. Ultimately, he follows through and they share an emotional goodbye. Is this one being so downbeat a good thing? Not necessarily. Maggie breaking her neck feels unearned, given that it was wildly contrived. I mean, if that stool had been even a centimeter further away, she'd have been fine. And by cramming this entire part of the film into just half an hour, it fails to adequately explore the complicated and polarizing issue of euthanasia. Nevertheless, the bleak tragedy of Maggie's end and the powerful acting make it impossible not to be moved by $1 Million Baby. Flaws and all. Furious 7. No one would have expected Fast and Furious, the big, brash and cartoonish action franchise, to ever produce a tearjerker. But yes, they did. Much like with Final Destination Bloodlines, it was due to real-life tragedy. Franchise lead Paul Walker shockingly died in a car accident during filming, meaning that the film was reworked into a send-off to Walker's character Brian O'Connor. Prior to release, it looked likely that this movie would be a mess. But in fact, it was a great movie, one of the very best in the series. And as for its tribute to Walker, it didn't just work, it worked amazingly. The film's concluding montage of Brian O'Connor is almost unbearably affecting, and the love that the cast and crew held for Walker reverberates through every frame. This closing sequence is soundtracked by the mega hit See You Again, written in tribute to Paul Walker. Now, it was overplayed a lot at the time, and it has many detractors, but if you're a Fast and Furious fan, that song is still likely to hit you in the feels. Logan. As Hugh Jackman's supposed farewell to his signature role, we all knew Logan might get emotional. Having said that, it's hard to imagine anyone was expecting it to get this intense. After all, X-Men Origins Wolverine and The Wolverine are both absolutely terrible, so expectations for Logan were probably fairly modest for many viewers. As such, when this frequently harrowing odyssey hit like a baseball between the eyes, few were prepared for it. An unrelentingly bleak, tragic superhero film, this unfolds in a hellish future where most of the X-Men are dead, and it sees an aging, deteriorating Wolverine trying to save some mutant children and do one last heroic act. Patrick Stewart also gives what was meant to be his last performance as Professor Charles Xavier, who's now very weak and suffering from Alzheimer's. By the end of Logan, both of these beloved characters have died heartbreaking deaths. Xavier is killed by a clone of Logan just as he's recalling how one of his telepathic seizures killed several of the X-Men, while Logan gives his life to protect Laura, a young mutant child who addresses him as her father as he dies. In fact, nearly every heroic character in this movie goes down, and it's just an incredibly sad movie all around. A great one? Absolutely, although it's not the easiest film to watch, and it will leave many viewers weeping. The Mist. With this one, it all comes down to one thing: the ending. The Mist has one of the cruelest and darkest film endings of the 21st century, the kind that'll have left audiences staggering out of cinemas with their souls crushed into powder. In The Mist, a supernatural mist filled with deadly creatures falls over a town. The town's residents hole up in the supermarket, but they're not much safer in there as the townsfolk begin to descend into murderous paranoia. By the end, 5 people, protagonist David, his son Billy, and 3 other allies, escape from the supermarket and drive off into the mist looking for aid. But they don't find it. Eventually, they run out of gas and decide to die. With only 4 bullets left in his gun, David shoots the other 4, including his son, and then steps outside, waiting to be eaten by the monsters. Instead, though, he's greeted by the military, who are resolving the crisis. They were seconds away from rescue, and David just killed his own son for nothing. The Grey. With The Grey, we expected a badass survival thriller involving Liam Neeson fighting wolves. But my oh my, how wrong we were. Instead, The Grey is a philosophical, character-focused survival film, and Neeson never actually fights any wolves on screen. It begins with his character Otway attempting suicide and remains resolutely miserable from that point forward. All of the survivors of the plane crash that starts the story off ultimately die in a variety of affecting, disturbing sequences, while the movie is also filled with somber philosophical dialogue that makes the whole thing even more morose. The film also boasts one of Liam Neeson's most affecting performances, one which no doubt hit uncomfortably close to home for him. It's revealed that Otway's wife died of a terminal illness before the picture's story, and Neeson made this movie not that long after the tragic death of his wife in a skiing accident. It culminates with a desperately upsetting scene in which Otway puts his wallet and those of his now deceased fellow survivors in the snow for whoever to find, before having one last fight with the wolves, choosing to make a stand even after all the hell he's been through. The Grey then cuts to the credits, and viewers don't find out what happened to Otway in the end, as if this wasn't all grim enough already. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. James Bond movies aren't exactly known for their emotion, but they do have some really heartfelt moments. In terms of which one made people cry the most, some might highlight 2021's No Time to Die. But actually, the more appropriate one to spotlight would be On Her Majesty's Secret Service. No Time to Die, a complete mess of a movie, tried to mimic the emotional devastation of On Her Majesty's Secret Service and paid direct homage to it multiple times, even using its theme song during the end credits. But all of No Time to Die's big emotional scenes were only engineered through its messy, hole-ridden plot, and few of them felt earned. No, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is the true Bond tearjerker. It features perhaps the most affecting, genuine love story in the whole franchise between James Bond and Tracy, which ultimately concludes with Tracy being cruelly murdered only hours after their wedding. More than 50 years on, the ending to this one is completely crushing. And as terrible as he was as Bond, George Lazenby ironically nails this scene. Train to Busan. Even in what might look like a fairly light film, you can generally expect some tear-jerking moments and an emotional death scene or two. South Korea currently makes some of the best scripted content in the world, so their movies and shows should be sought out. But be warned, they might leave you broken. That's definitely what happened with Train to Busan, one of the most popular South Korean films of the 2010s. With this one, people expected an action flick with zombies on a train. They absolutely got that. And they also got a frequently harrowing piece of melodrama which beautifully establishes a group of characters you'll really care about and then proceeds to kill off nearly all of them in tragic, gut-wrenching ways. In particular, the death of the lead character is difficult to think of without feeling emotional. This is such a heartfelt and dramatically rich horror movie, and all of its melodrama is one of the main reasons why this is arguably one of the best zombie pictures of all time. Train to Busan might leave you emotionally exhausted, but such is the richness of the experience that you might still find yourself going back for more. The Muppet Christmas Carol. Much like with Final Destination and Fast and Furious, The Muppets is a franchise that was never expected to deliver a weepy. Sometimes it's great to be wrong though. The Muppet Christmas Carol is a Christmas miracle. Most will go in expecting a jokey riff on A Christmas Carol, but instead, they got one of the very best and perhaps, believe it or not, the most faithful adaptation of Charles Dickens' 1843 novella. After all, it features many direct quotes from the book and follows the plot very closely. Most importantly of all, it treats Dickens' beautiful story with genuine respect and sincerity. There's plenty of comedy, as you'd expect from the Muppets, but there's also a lot of pathos and heartfelt character growth, much of which is provided by a legitimately fantastic performance from Sir Michael Caine as Ebenezer Scrooge. Caine treats the material with the respect it deserves and proceeds to deliver an often heartbreaking performance, albeit one which evolves to euphoric joy by the end, of course. Also, we can't forget the death of Tiny Tim, here played by Kermit's adorable nephew, Robin the Frog. That is completely shattering. Pig. Pig, an excellent drama film from director Michael Sarnowski and starring Nicolas Cage, is in a similar ballpark to The Grey, in that its logline and star set up totally the wrong expectations. In this one, Cage plays Robin Feld, a hermit whose beloved pet pig is stolen. He then goes back to the city he left behind to retrieve the animal. It would have been reasonable enough to expect a John Wick-style action romp with Nick Cage going crazy, yet Pig is about as far from that as can be. There's almost no violence at all, for this is a somber, character-driven meditation on trauma, with Cage giving a subtle, profoundly moving performance that shows just what a great actor he actually is when he applies himself to material that deserves his talents. It eventually wraps up with a razor-sharp ending that's both desperately sad and paradoxically hopeful, and it's unlikely to leave a dry eye in the house. Once again, we expected John Wick with Nick Cage instead of Keanu Reeves, and a pig instead of a pet dog, but we got something so much more special than that. Carrie. Many watching Carrie for the first time will probably go in expecting an angry, cathartic high school revenge movie, and those people will be caught off guard and left in pieces by the end. There is nothing cathartic about Carrie. It's one of the saddest horror movies of all time. A supernatural revenge tragedy in which nearly everyone dies and in which the titular character is subjected to the cruelest treatment by almost every other character, including her own mother. Well, one student does try to perform an act of kindness by getting Carrie invited to the prom, and this well-intentioned act leads to the film's infamous prom massacre, making it all even more depressing. Carrie's heartbreakingly tragic story and the overwhelming pathos running through the whole thing make this a sobering, shattering piece of cinema. It's the kind of picture that would be hard to re-watch often, brilliant though it is. And finally, Gladiator. Gladiator is fondly remembered as a manly action classic. And sure, it does fit that description, but it's also, however, a massive tearjerker. The story of Maximus Decimus Meridius is a bleak one. Early in the story, Commodus, one of the most hateful villains ever, is overcome with petty jealousy because his father, Emperor Marcus Aurelius, seems to favour Maximus over him. And so he kills his father, takes over as emperor, and tries to kill Maximus. Maximus escapes and flees home to find the burned bodies of his beloved wife and son, who have been cruelly killed at Commodus's hands. Maximus is then sold into slavery and becomes a gladiator. It's a sad tale, alright, and one that hits especially hard because it's happening to such a likeable character who audiences will deeply care for. Gladiator does conclude with Maximus killing Commodus and freeing Rome from his tyranny, but he does so at the cost of his own life. Maximus's death, which is intercut with him reuniting with his family in the afterlife and is accompanied by Hans Zimmer's hauntingly beautiful score, is almost unbearably moving, and it left entire cinema crowds weeping into their popcorn. That is why Gladiator is a classic. It's not just because of the fights and badass quotes. It's because it combines those things with a powerful dramatic story that'll make audiences cry like a bowl of diced onions.